Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag was the first step in a long journey. The journey of losing the identity of Assassin's Creed, but that doesn't make it bad. Quite the contrary, actually. Assassin's Creed 4 was the first Assassin's Creed since Assassin's Creed 2 to really innovate and switch up the core of what an Assassin's Creed game actually is. It was no longer about parkouring to your next main mission to assassinate one guy. No, this Assassin's Creed was about sailing the West Indies, fighting any ship, flying any colours and plundering to your heart's content, all in service of one goal: to upgrade your Jackdaw. That was what was appealing about Black Flag for me, but there is more to Black Flag than just those elements, and not all of it is good. So join me on this throwback to an Assassin's Creed game that many call their favourite and some call an abomination to the Assassin's Creed franchise, setting it on a course which it may never return from. There will be spoilers in this review, but I will timestamp it below if you'd rather avoid them. Assassin's Creed 4 opens up with a bang, throwing you right into the action following a man called Edward Kenway, a pirate whose only goal is to become one of the richest men in the West Indies and to be respected and seen as a man of property, as he mentions in every sequence.
Do you ever dream of the big score? A ship so full of gold and silver, just split it and sail home.
Sure, but it's only a dream. Every man hopes to find a dozen chests of gold with no owners. They're as rare as an honest king.
We will talk more about Edward and his story in a little bit, but first, Chapter 1, the West Indies. Hey, I got a green screen by the way. Well, it's not an official green screen, but hey, hello! Hi! The open world of Black Flag is incredible for multiple reasons, but the most important reason is that it's an open world that still hasn't been replicated from my memory. How many games are out there where you can choose to become a pirate, sailing the West Indies, jumping off your ship to explore a tiny island only to get attacked by leopards and almost eaten alive, to then quickly running back to your ship because you've been hunted down by pirate hunters? I can't think of any, and that is why Black Flag has a golden ticket right from the get-go to become one of the most loved Assassin's Creed games. Not only can you sail the West Indies, but you can visit places like Havana or Kingston, both of which are little cities themselves with a bunch of chests, side missions and treasure hunts to take part in. The world is dynamic. Rogue waves come at you at ferocious speeds, giant water spouts appear out of nowhere giving you a boost of speed or a quick swift death. Forts reign supreme over the seas, making every corner of the map a danger to explore. Whales come flying out of the sea, splashing you and your crew with water. Diving bells give you access to explore the depths of the sea you sail on, adding a whole new and unique aspect to this open world, and ships flying the British or Spanish flag are sailing these seas with you, ready to be plundered by Edward and his crew. The open world alone is my favourite of any Assassin's Creed game. It's so incredibly charming to explore, and visually it's still stunning even in 2023. The sheer variety of locations, while not being overly bloated like Odyssey, is masterfully done. It doesn't overwhelm you, but it makes it clear that every island, every ship and every side activity has a purpose and a reason to be explored. Plus there's no better feeling seeing a gold icon once you've completed everything an island has to offer. Exploring the seas is a truly addicting experience and incredibly hard to put down. Everything, like I said, feels dynamic to an extent and provides an open world experience like no other, but like every game there are flaws. A massive section of the open seas is blocked off during the early game. You have to complete about 4 or 5 sequences to gain access to everything the world has to offer, and for some that may be okay, but others that can be a pain in the ass. I can see players just hopping into the open world for the activities that provides, because the main missions are incredibly lackluster when compared to the gameplay loop that the open world offers, but those missions can wait for a few minutes. I also found that the best way to make money in those early sections is just to plunder as much rum and sugar as possible, which does make the assassination contracts and naval contracts a lot less appealing considering how little they offer in return of completion. In order to 100% locations, you will need to search for animus fragments as well, which offers pretty much nothing of value in my experience. They're just there to get your OCD going, if anything, increasing your playtime, so I eventually just gave up exploring every island because of those damn fragments. They just offer nothing to me, so I have no real incentive to collect them, unlike chests and treasure map locations. And my final issue with the open world itself is how exploration is done. As innovative as this world was, the way you find items remains largely the same as any other AC game. You jump off your ship and swim to an island, then you go to a viewpoint or multiple viewpoints, which tells you exactly where everything is, which kind of takes the fun of exploring and discovering these things for yourself out of the game. That being said, I totally get why this is a feature. You can ignore the viewpoints and go searching without them, but at the end of the day, Black Flag has a huge open world, so I think most people will opt for using the viewpoints. So it's not technically a bad thing. It's always good to have options for players, and for some players, having everything pointed out for you is kind of a good thing, so that's entirely up to your playstyle. The West Indies is simply an incredible experience, wonderful to explore, and replaying it for the first time in over 2 years, I think it may have taken my spot for favourite open world Assassin's Creed settings, because it's awesome. There are still aspects I haven't spoke of with the open world, so I'll be doing that when we move on to the mission design and things like that, etc. But first, let's talk presentation. Chapter 2, Presentation. Assassin's Creed 4 is no slouch when it comes to presentation. The seas look fantastic surrounding you for most of the game. It's hard not to see how much care went into the locations you explore. Everything you see is full of colour and vibrance until later on in the game, which suits it thematically. Character models still look really good even in 2023, and was the biggest surprise for me. Sure, they may have not been as good as the latest Naughty Dog game or anything like that, but they still look fantastic, especially when you consider Black Flag was a PS3 and Xbox 360 game that was ported to next-gen consoles. At least I think it was. Maybe it was a PS4 game and then they put it over to PS3, but I highly doubt it because 2013 was the release of PS4. It doesn't matter really, it still looks really good. Facial expressions never fail to deliver, making every character you come across command the scene anytime the camera is on them, especially Blackbeard.
So I must conclude that you men are the pariahs of Charlestown, and I would profit better by using your organs for chum and your bones for char. By Christ!
Character designs are phenomenal, Edward's robes looks fantastic and suits the time period, but I did find myself gravitating towards the pirate outfit you can get from Uplay. I just think it looks awesome and it matches the aesthetic way better. Blackbeard, the Assassins, Ben Hornigold, Charles Vane and others all have unique looks and detail which makes each individual stand out consistently throughout the game, and that does become very important towards the end of the story because it can be very easy to lose track of characters, but with their designs it's hard to. Voice acting is actually phenomenal. Most AC games have okay voice acting at best, but pretty much everyone brought their A game here. Every character has a distinct voice and rarely sounds dull, quickly becoming some of my favourite characters in the franchise. Blackbeard in particular steals the show every time he's in a cutscene, and seeing how he changes over the course of the game with his persona is pretty awesome to watch, and adds a lot of comedic moments. I really like this interpretation of Blackbeard in particular, and sure, the real bloke probably wasn't anywhere near as charming or charismatic, but you know, Blackbeard offers a levity the story desperately needed.
Men will drop to their knees, pleading for their lord before all else.
Oh God. Looks fine.
Of course it does.
The soundtrack for Black Flag is outstanding. Every piece of music throughout fits the world you're exploring without taking over scenes or gameplay sections. Some tracks are used sparingly, specifically for important moments in the story, with a character death for a big moment for a character's arc, most of which are incredible to listen to. But then you have tracks that are blasted almost every time you come into combat, which can be annoying for some, but I had a blast listening to those tracks every time they touched my eardrums. Assassin's Creed 3 did a similar thing, but the combat track that was used really pissed me off more than usual. I just thought that track in particular was awful when compared to the rest of the tracks in Assassin's Creed 3, but hey, that's pointless. We're talking about Assassin's Creed 4 here. So pretty much all of the presentation is fantastic, apart from one major, and I mean major, issue. To some, this will sound nitpicky, but to me it's vital for presentation, and that is sound design. The sound design of Black Flag is just a mess. Some aspects sound incredible. Firing cannons gives you that loud boom that you desperately need to sell it. Pistols sound good as well, and overall the islands and cities have a good atmosphere thanks to the sounds of people going around doing their own business and wind and all that stuff. And like I said earlier, the voice acting is phenomenal, but everything else is just awful or doesn't work at all. I can't tell you how many times the sound would just cut off during battles or just general exploring. Combat while looking good sounds terrible. Swords clashing sound like little playthings that you give to kids. Death sounds are often completely silent during finishing animations, and when the sound of combat does work, like swords clashing, it's often delayed by a couple milliseconds, making it stand out significantly despite how short the delay is. It just sucks and is a quality of life update waiting to happen, but it just never came. It's such a weird issue and one Ubisoft for some reason never fixed. Sure, it may sound nitpicky, but sound is so incredibly important, and most of the time it just doesn't work properly, or just sounds awful, which just sucks to be honest. I was really hoping Ubisoft would have fixed these issues, but clearly they're just never gonna bother. Either way, it didn't really affect my enjoyment most of the time, but it's just such a weird issue to leave in when you could very easily patch it. But I think it's time to move on to the best aspect of Assassin's Creed 4. Chapter 3, Jackdaw. The Jackdaw is why Black Flag is so damn good. The West Indies is great to explore, but if the ship stuff didn't work, it would fall flat on its face, and I'm glad to say it doesn't suck. The gameplay loop of upgrading the Jackdaw is so incredibly addictive, the combat mechanics are almost perfect with very little to improve on, ship combat is so much more engaging than all the stuff on foot, switching between heavy shot to chain shot to mortars to then the ram a big ass ship is just super exhilarating. Boarding enemy ships is such a blast despite how repetitive it is, hearing your crew scream "Aye!" as you swing over and air assassinate two guys with your crew joining you moments later is the best stuff Assassin's Creed has done in years. Enemy variety is also pretty great. You've got gunboats, schooners, brigs, frigates and man-of-wars to take on, sometimes all at the same time with each other, all of which have their own weaknesses and strengths that you have to learn and take advantage of, which creates so much more depth than the sword play combat system, which is lacking super heavily. I'll talk about that in just a minute. This can actually be really difficult as well if you're not careful. It adds a lot of stakes to your decisions, along with potentially losing your cargo if you fail, which makes the whole experience so much more intense, which is exactly what Assassin's Creed is lacking in previous and newer entries. The fact you can actually lose valuable items rather than just resetting at checkpoints is just the cherry on top, creating not just a fun experience, but an intense one as well. The upgrade system is pretty much perfect as well. Everything you plunder has a lot of value. Sugar and rum for reals, and cloth and wood and metal is needed to get the best upgrades in the game. As you can see right here, plenty of upgrades. Look at it, the list goes on and on and on. This upgrade system is also incredibly addictive. Seeing your Jackdaw slowly upgrade with more cannons, a stronger hull, and much more is super fun and actually has a major effect on how to approach your combat with those upgrades. My favourites to upgrade were the cannons and mortars. Getting a really nice broadside in is so satisfying, and those forts didn't stand a chance against my mortars. It really is pretty much perfect. In order to max out your ship though, you need to find treasure maps and deep dive into the sea to get these schematics to upgrade, which actually adds another reason to explore the West Indies, which is just fantastic. I really have no negatives when it comes to the Jackdaw. Sure, some changes could be made, like potentially offering an upgrade system to change your ship type from like a brig to a frigate, but honestly, it's balanced so well I can't even complain. Along with all of this, you've got naval contracts, which adds extra content to do, which unlocks some pretty badass pistols, but the naval contracts just aren't great, but they're good enough to justify completing them, but there's not much else to say about that. The Jackdaw and its gameplay loop is perfect. Modern day sucks. It has no real value at all, and it's not very fun. Thankfully, it is relegated to 3 different missions, as you can see. They're really boring, and honestly, just ignore it if you can. Just don't ever quit the animals unless you're forced to, okay? That's all I have to say. Let's move on. Chapter 5, Mission Design and On-Foot Gameplay. Now this is where I'm going to ruffle some feathers. I think the gameplay on foot for Assassin's Creed 3, Black Flag, and Rogue is genuinely terrible. I was nice in my previous reviews, but on replay and experiencing so many better combat systems over the last 2 years, I just have to say it. There is no depth to this combat system. You counter and you kill, that is it. The only depth is a pistol for range kills and a smoke bomb to run away, but the combat system is so incredibly basic and simple, you could wipe 500 guys the moment you start the game. There's no grabs, kicks, throws, weapon variety, interesting control scheme, enemy variety. It really is just countering and killing. It's genuinely a pathetic combat system that doesn't innovate or offer anything unique. Ubisoft did nothing with dual wielding despite offering no weapon variety at all. There's no change or unique control scheme to experiment with dual swords, like making square and triangle correspond with your left and right sword to offer some experimentation. Nope, nothing. And it just sucks. Yes, the animations look great, but if the combat system is so easy to the point where you will never die, then what the hell is the point of upgrading Edward for health boosts or pistol pouches, etc. I upgraded Edward just to see if it would actually change anything, but nothing changes. I thought maybe tougher enemies would be added in later sequences, but nope. You've got 3 enemy types and that's it, all of which play the exact same other than having to press X to spin a single enemy type around and then being forced to counter some of the hardest enemies in the game. It's such a terrible combat system with almost nothing redeeming about it. I know a lot of people will disagree, but I just thought it was awful. Main mission design overall is okay, but like many people have said, there are just way too many tailing missions, all of which last like 5 to 10 minutes, and most require you to literally go in a circle around an area of the map. It's not the tailing that is bad, it's just how lazy they made those tailing missions and added so many of them, which really hindered the overall experience, because you get a good taste of the missions that are absolutely fantastic, but it's just held back by tailing missions so often, which just ruins any of the fun, and you're just worried every time you go into a mission whether you're going to be tailing someone, which is just unfortunate. Also, Ubisoft were incredibly cheeky, making the tailing mission's optional objective being stay out of combat. Like, you've just made me walk for 10 minutes only to ask me to stay out of combat. I'm not going to do that, Ubisoft. No. Just no. These side missions like assassination contracts are pretty awful. A lot of them are so poorly designed you can fast travel to a location, spawn directly on your target and just shoot them and then fast travel back. It's such a weird flaw. It's like there was no playtesting done. It would have been better to have targets on those islands all the time so you can naturally take them out as you explore and be rewarded for it. But, you know, that's just my idea. When tailing isn't there, Black Flag plays really well, and most of those missions are well designed, requiring you to use both your ship and Edward to navigate and complete these missions. I just wish there was more of it rather than boring ass tailing missions. The stealth is also really lackluster. Thankfully they added the blow dart weapon, which can put enemies to sleep or make them insane, which was a cool addition, but just not enough to call it a substantial improvement. Stealth has always been bad in Assassin's Creed games, but it's just serviceable here. Nothing amazing and certainly not special, but it gets the job done. Final chapter, story with spoilers. The story is good, but that's all I'll say without spoilers, so spoilers are here now. That's your warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Quit off now if you don't want to listen. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag has decent main missions, but the story itself is one of the best in the franchise. Edward Kenway is an incredible character that is both charismatic and intense at times, and is super easy to empathize with. The side characters like Blackbeard, Adewale, and Mary, as well as many others, are all charismatic with their own flaws, which makes them extremely interesting to watch, and the writing overall is so much better than most of the new Assassin's Creed games. Black Flag explores loads of themes, but mainly loyalty, family, and revenge in some cases, but most importantly, it's a story about self-reflection.
For years I've been rushing around taking whatever I fancied, not giving a tinker's curse for those I hurt. And yet here I am, with riches and a reputation, feeling no wiser than when I left home. Yet when I turn around, look at the course I've run. There's not a man or woman that I love left standing beside me.
Black Flag doesn't really explore assassins and Templars, but opts to focus on a story that is both epic and tragic. It wastes no time and builds the world around you pretty much perfectly, and those emotional moments genuinely hit, which is what was missing for me in the newer Assassin's Creed games. There are so many quotable lines, and it never goes overboard. Black Flag feels incredibly grounded, and it pulls very few punches with the story here. Blackbeard's death was done incredibly well and is probably the most memorable moment of the game for me. Not going out in a blaze of glory, but simply being cornered and overwhelmed. No overly long monologue, a simple couple lines while he takes on his killers was pretty much perfect, and this moment marks an entire change in the direction of the story, and you can really feel that.
In a world without gold, we might have been heroes!
As good as the story is, the villains are very lackluster and it can get super messy. It's clear Ubisoft were trying to force in assassins and Templars along with all the pirate stuff, which results in a really lackluster Assassin's Creed story, but a fantastic pirate story. And honestly, I could very easily see a multiverse where Ubisoft took the AC franchise in a completely different direction, doing away with all the assassins and Templar stuff and just doing massive period pieces, because it clearly works really well. They shot themselves in the foot calling this Assassin's Creed because it just isn't an Assassin's Creed game most of the time, but that really didn't hinder my overall enjoyment whatsoever. The Assassins play a very little role throughout, and the Templars, while getting a good amount of screen time, are just very boring villains, and they all have their own motivations, but you're so focused on everything else you will tend to forget those motivations and just think, yep, another villain down, where's all the sugar and rum? Arrgh. The addition of the Sage Roberts was actually terrific. I really liked his character. It's the exact kind of guy that the pirate life would attract, and does eventually become the big bad towards the end, which is great considering the actual Templars weren't that interesting. So the story is great, the character work is fantastic, and everyone has something to do. But what keeps it all together is Edward himself. Edward is easily one of the best characters in the franchise that has ever been introduced to it. He's far more interesting than the likes of Eivor or Jacob Frye, and is a genuinely flawed character, which makes him so much more memorable. I do hope Ubisoft decides to scale down like Black Flag and make their characters more interesting, rather than having this 90-hour game where all the lines are really basic and, you know, there's nothing memorable about them. I could go on and on about the story, but this video is already getting pretty long, so it's best to move on to the conclusion. So if it isn't obvious, yes, I do think you should buy Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Despite some of its annoying aspects like tailor missions and a terrible modern day, it's still one of the best Assassin's Creed experiences out there that explores more both thematically and physically. Thank you all for watching and making it to the end, you absolute legends. I can't thank you enough. These longer videos have been so much fun to make and really boosted my motivation to keep making reviews, so thank you again. All I can say now is just keep it classic.